Well, potentially seismic changes for the US-South Africa relationship. This bill is recommending a comprehensive review of the bilateral relationship and accusing South Africa of brazenly abandoning the relationship with the US and aligning with terrorist organizations. It was suggested by Congressman Ronnie Jackson, who celebrated Tuesday's victory of it passing through the committee hearing by saying the days of allowing our so-called allies to walk all over us are over. The US government could potentially determine if senior government officials and ANC leaders in South Africa have been involved in corruption and human rights abuses. And if they determine so, they would then impose sanctions on certain individuals, and that would include travel bans and asset freezes. At heart, really, the US is unhappy that South Africa has taken Israel to the International Criminal Court over war crimes and accused it of genocide for its involvement in Gaza. The US is also angry that South Africa really is siding with the Palestinian people against the US ally Israel. They're also saying that South Africa has undermined US national security interests. They've given the example of carrying out joint military drills with Russia. Well, at Tuesday's hearing, Brian Mast, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, he said in support of the bill that this was not about severing ties with South Africa, but rather resetting expectations that the US has. Democrats, though, pushed back. Gregory Meeks said that President Trump had disproportionately targeted South Africa and was trying to embarrass President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, it still has a way to go. Tuesday's hearing was called a committee markup. It was in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. They voted to move it forward, which means at some point the full House of Representatives will vote on this. It's unclear when it will happen. They're now on recess until September. If it's approved by the House, it'll move on to the Senate and land on the president's desk for approval. And remember, Republicans hold a slim majority in both the House and the Senate. The very fact, though, really, that this is even being considered could suggest a monumental shift in the way that the US deals with South Africa, a long-term ally. That relationship with this could change dramatically. Nick Harper, SABC News, Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, the government has done it again. They've managed to make South Africa look like a place where listening is optional, arrogance is compulsory, and political survival is the only policy that matters. First, here at home, they've taken a citizen-led national dialogue, supposedly, a process meant to be run by the people, for the people, and hijacked it so it should be in the Guinness World Book of Records under fastest democratic derailment. And now they're telling the United States, our third largest trading partner, that their transformation agenda is non-negotiable, even if it means killing a trade deal in the middle of a 30% tariff war. That's right. The government is managing to alienate both its own former leaders and its most important allies abroad in the same news cycle. Impressive. Let's start with the walkout. 7 major legacy foundations representing the names and legacies of Thabo Mbeki, Stephen Bandubiko, Luthuli, Tutu Tambo de Klerk, and the Strategic Dialogue Group have all just quit the preparatory task team for the National Dialogue. Why, you ask? Because, the government has bulldozed the process, ignored the advice of its own subcommittee chairs, and rammed through a 15 August date to suit the political diary in Pretoria. Because we all know local government elections, the LGEs, should be next year, and this is scheduled to end after 12 months, which means if it does end after 12 months, it ends in August, which is just 2 months before the LGEs, the local government election, which is not a good time to end. Now, in other words, the people who built this process were told to shut up and watch government run the show. And here's the kicker. These aren't random activists. These are organizations, tied to former presidents, Nobel Peace Prize winners, liberation icons, the giants of, South African history and all of that. If the ANC, if the government can't even listen to its own former leaders, how on earth do you think they are going to listen to you and me? If Tutu and Tambo's foundations can't get a hearing, what chance does an ordinary citizen from Klipfontein or Khayelitsha or Kimberley have? Now, while all this was happening, over in Pretoria, Minister in the Presidency, Kumbusa Ntshavheni, in her ever infinite wisdom, was busy sending a crystal clear message to Washington that, well, in this case, not just the government, but the ANC's transformation agenda is non-negotiable, even if it costs South Africa a trade deal with President Donald Trump's America. Now, I'm all for standing up for your principles, yeah, I agree, but you'd think the ANC might pick a smarter battlefield than trade talks with our third largest economic partner in the middle of a tariff crisis. We're talking 30% tariffs that came into effect this week. Sectors hammered, such as agriculture and automotive, two of our biggest job creators. Trump's over there celebrating the billions from tariffs, and Ramaphosa's on the phone trying to sweet talk him. But in public, Ntshavheni is saying our transformation agenda is not for the sake of its own. It's to make sure we build an equal, united, and prosperous South Africa. Sounds noble, but the Americans are hearing. We're not changing our BEE laws or our Expropriation Act or anything else you hate. Deal or no deal. You know the game. Let's not forget. Relations between Pretoria and Washington are already at rock bottom. Trump's second term started with him accusing South Africa of confiscating land, as well as persecuting white farmers, and even granting them refugee status in the US. In May, when Ramaphosa flew to Washington to smooth things over, Trump blindsided him with videos of Julius Malema singing "Kill the Boer" and a dossier on farm murders. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on this channel we have denounced the song "Kill the Boer," but I think it's very important to remember that when Ramaphosa went to the Washington, in his infinite wisdom, him and the other ministers went there and said, well, look, we're not just killing farmers, we're killing everyone. Everyone is dying, old grannies are being raped, it's just cesspool that is going on in South Africa. That is the situation that, our delegation went and presented. Now, Trump's hinting he might skip the G20 summit because, I quote, they have some very bad policies. Very, very bad policies. Policies like where people are being killed. Close quote. Now, Pretoria rejects his genocide claims, but let's be real, the optics aren't great. You see, these two headlines, the National Dialogue walkout and the US tariff standoff, are actually the same story. They both show a government that simply doesn't listen. Not to the people at home, not to the global partners abroad, not even to the legacies of its own struggle heroes. At home, the ANC ignored the Thabo Mbeki, the Tutu, and the Biko Foundation, and pushes ahead with a sham dialogue. That's more government rally than citizen process. Abroad, they ignore the economic reality that South Africa needs trade. South Africa does not need tariff wars, and instead double down on policy positions that have already caused diplomatic damage, including economic damage. In both cases, the attitude is the same. We're right, you're wrong, and if you don't like it, tough. Please F off. Here's the dangerous truth. When a government can't even respect the voices of the people who built the democracy, the voices of ordinary citizens will be nothing but background noise. And when the same government alienates its most important trade allies, the economy those citizens depend on gets weaker, which means more unemployment, more poverty, and more instability. The government thinks this is about sovereignty. In reality, it's about stubbornness, and stubbornness has a price. In the domestic arena, the price is trust. In the international arena, the price is jobs, investment, and growth. So here we are, 7 legacy foundations walking out at home because the government won't listen. A major trade partner fuming abroad because the ANC won't budge. And in both cases, the message from the government is the same. We don't take orders from anyone, not even our own, in ANC's case, heroes, not even the people who fed our economy. It's a dangerous kind of pride, the kind that leaves you friendless in the world and deaf in your own country. And if the government can't listen to the giants who came before them, or the nations keeping us afloat, then you and I, the ordinary South African, are just whispers in a hurricane. This is Kuhle, reminding you that a government that won't listen at home or abroad is a government heading for trouble. And when they hit the wall, we'll all feel the crash. If you want, please do consider signing up for channel membership. It's as cheap as 20 Rand. As well as you can support us by like and sharing this video, as well as subscribing to the channel. This has been 10 Minutes with Kuhle, and I've been your host, Kuhle Kwetu Masego. Till next time, stay safe, stay blessed. Shabbat Shalom.
Speaking at a post-cabinet media briefing, Ntshavheni revealed that cabinet has received a framework deal aimed at mitigating the impact of the tariff. The agreement includes a provision for the tariff to be reviewed once both countries reach a broader trade settlement. The US levy, which will come into effect at midnight, has sparked concern across South Africa's export industries, particularly agriculture and automotive manufacturing. Analysts warn that more than 30,000 jobs could be at risk if the tariff remains in place. Ntshavheni has emphasized that cabinet remains committed to protecting jobs and supporting affected industries while continuing negotiations with the US to secure a fair and sustainable trade agreement.
On updates to cabinet, first is the framework deal with the United States of America. Cabinet received an update on the framework deal with the United States of America in light of the 30% tariffs against South Africa that are expected to come into effect today, the 7th of August 2025, with the provision that the tariffs will be reviewed as soon as the two countries reach a deal. Cabinet affirmed government's commitment to finding constructive and sustainable solutions through continued engagements with the United States of America, including at a presidential level. As communicated this morning through the presidency, President Ramaphosa has reached out through a phone call to President Trump yesterday morning as part of bolstering South Africa's negotiation efforts on the trade agreement. Government's efforts remain focused on growing the economy to save and create new jobs, which include intensifying diversification efforts and strengthening which include intensifying diversification efforts and strengthening our global supply chain integration as the country works to expand its export markets to Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and across the African continent to enhance our economic resilience. Specific to industries impacted by the tariff increase, and the ministers of Trade and Industry and Competition and Justice and Agriculture, will brief on the details of these measures specific to the tariffs arrangement. I think by next week, Monday they are confirming. Specific to industries impacted by the tariff increase, government is focusing on demand-side interventions in the impacted industries and targeted interventions to ensure industry stability and safeguarding employment. These interventions include the establishment of an export support desk, which will serve as a direct point of contact for affected companies. measures to assist companies to absorb the tariff and facilitate long-term resilience and growth strategies to protect jobs and productive capacity in South Africa.